Great. I like your type of argument. You basically have intellectual discussion instead of a screaming argument. I'm a libertarian. I'm basically on the opposite side of the spectrum as you. But I wonder if you could clarify a couple things for me. I believe Palestine was the entire area covering Israel and Jordan. I wonder if you could tell me at what point the Palestinians went to Jordan, and I realized they were kicked out when they blew up some passenger jets or something. And are you familiar with that?
Yes, I think more than you are, by the sound of it. I'm not sure, I don't, well, go ahead.
Basically revolved around the Palestinians that were from Israel. I don't understand if there's 22 Arab states, why they have to take over Israel.
Well, there are 49 American states. If someone told you you couldn't, apart from the one you're sitting in, if someone told you, actually, we would rather have your bit of Los Angeles for ourselves, from now on, this will only be, you can only be a landholder or a householder here if you profess the, let's say, Muslim or Buddhist faith. Otherwise, get out. This bit's ours. You're happy to go to Colorado on that basis? I don't think so, and I think if you think about it, you wouldn't insult anyone else by treating them, their society or their country as disposable as that. The Palestinians do not feel that God gave the land to someone else and they therefore have to be flung out. And I completely agree with them. They've every right to resist that ridiculous proposal.
Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. A question for Mr. Hitchens, please.
You're going. You're on.
Ask away.
Do you believe it's healthy for the United States to be so much influenced by Israel? We are a large country. They are very small, but they have much influence in the media and especially in politics.
Thanks.
Well, believe me, I know, I believe I understand the question, and there are various tones of voice in which it can be asked, including a tone of voice that I don't like, that suggests that there's a sort of covert Jewish hand that directs U.S. policy, which is not true, and very often clusters with other forms of unpleasantness. I do think that the United States gives far too great a proportion of its military aid budget to Israel and in return asks for insufficient Israeli responsibility. The Israelis are the custodians of the West Bank by an act of war, which their occupation of it is not recognized as legal. I've already said what I think should happen about that. There should be a West Bank state. The United States could make that difference. You could say to the Israelis, we will defend the existence of a Jewish community or a Jewish state in Palestine. We will not underwrite it becoming an expansionist and colonial state. If you want to do that, you pay the difference yourself. That alone would have probably solved the problem by now. And I do wish, yes, if you want to put it like that, that there was more cogent discussion along those lines in both the media and in Congress. And as for the Israelis, everybody knows that, because I mustn't seem to duck that question, because I know how toxic it is. Everybody knows that if you want to occupy people against their will, if you want to be the governor of another people who haven't chosen you, you will end up visiting terrible cruelty on them. There certainly cannot be a humane occupation.
Christopher Hitchens, let's go to Cambridge, Maryland. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much. Mr. Hitchens, I have 3 direct questions, short questions for you, please. Do you feel that Israel has a right to exist within secure borders? Do you feel that the United States should intervene should Iran and/or Russia try to close the Straits of Hormuz? And would you seek relief from a 24-hour shoot-on-sight curfew from any quarter in which relief might be found? Thank you.
All right, thanks for the call.
Very good questions, and I think I know what you're trying to pin me down on. On the first, yes, I do, but I think the securely recognized borders should not allow for Israeli colonization or occupation of the territory of its neighbors, which is what it's doing now. The right to exist argument has been used now to the point where what it's going to mean is that the Israel you're talking about will include the annexed and illegally occupied West Bank. So the right to exist argument is going to rebound on those who use it unclearly and who don't say what they mean by Israel. It's very interesting, the Israeli government has never said where it thinks the borders of Israel really ought to be and what it would settle for. I think it would be an immense help if Israel's going to insist on the right to exist, if it tells us where it thinks Israel's boundaries should be. Every other country does do that.
Well, it's always good to be asked to begin by straightening out the Israel-Palestine question. So why don't we get that out of the way? I think there's a distinction you're failing to make, and it's actually, if I may say it, clarified a little in... it's called Dieu n'est pas grand, available at fine bookstores everywhere, including in this voisinage. Israeli archaeology, which I think is a very courageous and honest profession, in particular Professor Finkelstein, the head of the department at the University of Tel Aviv, has clarified it for us. The story of the Exodus from Egypt, the wandering in the Sinai, the conquest of Jericho, so is all balls from beginning to end. It's completely, fantastically made up. There isn't a word of truth in it, and it's just as well it isn't true, because it involves, if were it true, it would involve divine instruction for genocide and enslavement, as well as genital mutilation and a lot of other things that, without which we could well do. However, Israeli archaeology, many Jews say, come on, what if it's none of it's true, the whole Moses thing is all made up, can't you give me anything to cling to? What? Yes. If you go and dig in Palestine, the first thing that any archaeologist will do going to a village will be dig in the midden, dig in the rubbish dump, find what people threw away and when and in what order. It's very, very interesting always. Well, in certain hill communities of Palestine, way, way, way back, you will find that while all the other neighbouring villages do have pig bones in their middens and in their garbage. These villages don't. No pigs. That's not the only proof, but it's one of many. There have been Jewish people in Palestine for a very long time. Their claim to the right to live there is as good as anybody else's and better than some. But the question is this, and it was posed by many Jewish spokesmen from the very beginning of the enterprise, when Herzl first mooted it. Do you want a state for Jews in Palestine? Or do you want a Jewish state? Now just ponder this for a second. Since I'm stuck with this, I may as well absolutely clarify it. Here's what I mean by that distinction. Should Pakistan be what it was first claimed to be, a state for Muslims of India, so Muslims in India can feel safe in their own state? Or should it be a Muslim state, where everyone has to follow Muslim law? And where if you're not a Muslim, you don't really have any real rights? And that's the difference that Zionism attempts to blur, and I think it would be better off unblurred.
Agreed.
There you go. But of course, I mean, I need hardly add, no one else's religious claim to the land is any better. I mean, that goes with it. Ça va sans Dieu. On the point of purchase, I'd like to take up on a single word, very important. You wouldn't say, would you, that the United States has no purchase on the government of Israel?
No, I wouldn't.
No. I mean, in other words, if the Israelis are going to continue to build settlements in an identifiable, just a single suburb of Jerusalem, where most of the Arab population can produce documents proving they've owned their homes since before the British Mandate. If American policy can't get them to stop building in that one identifiable suburb of Jerusalem, then there's no such thing as leverage or purchase. And Obama went to all the trouble to point out that this is a terrible thing. He should have said more than he did, in my view, that it's theft as well as an obstacle to negotiations, and then walked away from that. So that a punk government like that of Netanyahu, under the influence of a ratbag religious party, the Shas party, crackpot Orthodox party that happens to run the Ministry of Housing, is allowed to humiliate the United States, not just in the person of its vice president, who was there at the time, but its president and its Congress and its voters. And immediately the president backpedals, and now he's being attacked by some leading American Jewish organizations as being, in principle, anti-Israel. So he's had a fight with one of the Democratic Party's most important voting blocs. He's done nothing for the Palestinians, and he's made himself look like a jerk. This is not impressive.
But when was American policy in the Middle East impressive?
Well, actually, I'll give you an example. When George Bush Sr. said to the Israelis, if you go on like this, I will ask Congress to suspend your loan guarantees, I thought that was extremely impressive. And so did everyone else in the Middle East, and it led to the nearest we've ever had to a proper peace conference. That was in Madrid. Bill Clinton chose to run that year from the right against Bush, saying that he thought Bush was being soft on Cuba, just like Kennedy. thought Eisenhower and Nixon were being soft on communism in Cuba, and also from the right on Israel, saying if he was president, the Israelis would not be subjected to this kind of pressure. So the last time that there was an impressive American policy, it was a Republican administration, and it was undone by the hero of every liberal in this room. I'd better give you the straight answer. I think Zionism, the idea of building a state of Jewish farmers on Arab land in the Middle East, is a stupid idea to begin with. I've always thought so. My mother wanted to go and be a Zionist immigrant at one point. I tried to talk her out of it. It's been a thing in my family. I think it's a bad idea. I think it's a messianic idea. I think it's a superstitious idea. And I think
so the idea of Israel's right to exist is...
Well, no, now that it's there,
has no play with you.
Many states are founded on injustices or foolishness and bad ideas.
And boundaries are drawn by all kinds of political...
Yeah, it doesn't mean that anyone can just come and evict or destroy them. And I'm not saying that. But I think I'd have to say, so as not to seem shady,
yeah.
I've always thought it's a silly, messianic, superstitious nationalist idea, and it's a waste of Judaism. And it guaranteed a quarrel with the Arabs because it meant we're going to take away from you what's most precious, your land, by trying to make Jews into peasants. Already a silly idea. That's not the way to rescue Central European Jewry, make them into farmers in Palestine. Guaranteed an injustice to the Arabs, which now anyone can see, and is now entering its third, fourth generation. Fourth generation of Palestinians brought up either in exile or dispossession or under occupation and humiliation. And now we know that something has to be done to address what is part of the original, let's not call it original sin, original misconception of the thing. So I've been writing in favor of Palestinian homeland all my life, and I'm no more, no less in favor of it than I was because of recent events.
And now the Bush administration is
in favor. It's a matter of principle.
And now the Bush administration is in favor of it.
Well, yes, they were edging towards it. It's a pity about the timing, because they were edging towards it before. I don't want it to look as if they did it as a concession. But it should be a matter of principle. If Jews born in Brooklyn have a right to a state in Palestine, then Palestinians born in Jerusalem have a right to a state in Palestine. Anyone who doesn't agree with that principle, I think, is suspect.
I think most people do.
They do, but but why in that case do we have the one and not the other? After all, it's America that pays for all this and arms the Israelis and is very much involved in it. If it's a matter of principle, then we should have witnessed to it a bit more forcibly than we did.